Aloha and welcome. In this lesson, we're going to talk about list comprehensions. List comprehensions are, in my opinion, one of the coolest things in Python. They reduce a lot of work into a very small amount of code, and it's extremely powerful. And just to let you know in advance, I'm going to be explaining this in very simple terms today. I'm going to give you very simple examples. You can get into very complex examples. You can make complex uses of this as we get into the conditional list comprehensions and things like that. So I want to start off with it in the most basic of forms, though, because I think that once you grasp it and you understand it, you can build upon that. But in the book, you'll notice that they have some examples. They start with very simple examples, and then they get into some that are like, wow, this is really complex. They're doing, advanced formulas on it. So let's start out simple. So first of all, what is list comprehension? Well, a list comprehension is a structure that we use. It's a form that we use to take a list that we want to do something to each element. And we use this list comprehension, and the list comprehension will go through each and every item in the list and perform an action upon it. So it's really simple in its simplest form. Let me show you, let's pull up VS Code here and get right into the example. So if you look in here, you're going to see that we have the form of new list equals bracket expression for loop variable name in iterable. So let's break this down. The first thing to note is we have this bracket, and that's a reminder that what we're doing is we're creating a list. Whatever happens in here, it returns a list for us. So the brackets tell us that we're getting a list value back from this. So the expression is going to be the value that we put into our list. The for loop variable name in iterable part gets into the loop that we're going to do here. So we have the loop variable name, and we're going to assign each instance or each element in the iterable to the loop variable name. We're going to loop through it. And as we loop through it, we're going to take element by element, assign it to this loop variable name, and then we're going to do the expression upon it to create our list. So let's make a simple example. So an example here, I've just made a number list going from 1 to 10. And the thing that we want to do here is we want to square each and every number that we have in this list. So how do we go about doing that? Well, we start with our brackets. So that's going to signify the that we're doing a list comprehension here. And then we say expression. The expression that we have, in other words, the value that we're going to put into this list is going to be num to the power of 2, because remember, we're going to square each and everything in here. So the loop part is for num in num list. So we have num list up here. So we're saying for num in num list. So what we're doing is we're setting up that loop, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going through that, assigning num to each and every element. And then we're doing this. And this expression here is going to be assigned to that list that we're creating. So we're going to go through this. We're going to have 1 bound to num, and we're going to go 1 to the second power. And then we're going to bind 2 to num, and we'll have 2 to the second power, and on and on. And we're going to be creating that list with each and every element that we just created. So what we're going to do here, we're going to comment out our code down here. We're going to run this, and it'll print the list, the initial list that we have. And then it'll print the squares list. So when we run this, you'll see that, let me go ahead and clear this out. When we run this, we get, first of all, of course, just the list, just to show you that, hey, it is indeed a list, 1 to 10. And then squares, what we calculate off of that. And sure enough, it's the square of each and every one of these. So that was neat. We can do other things with this too. You're not tied to integer values. You could do float values here. You could do, if you change your function, or if you change the list comprehension itself, you can have strings here. let's say you were to go through a list of names, and you could add, I'm from the South. We have very Southern sounding names. Let's do something ridiculous here. So let's just comment this out. And I'm going to come up with names. We're going to say Bobby, or no, we're going to have, let's see, we're going to do a list. So let's start out with Joe. Let's see, Bob, Billy, and let's see, Skeeter. There's a nice Southern name for you. So anyhow, we're going to take each of these names, and then we're going to have our new name list. So we're going to have new name here. We're going to say new name equals, we're going to start our list comprehension, and we're going to say that, let's start with the for part of it. We'll come back and do the other part. We're going to say for name in names, and that gives us that part right there. Then we're going to go back and we're going to say, what are we going to get out of that? So we're going to take name, and we're going to, let's say, append something to it. So what could we append to it? Let's take, this isn't a really good example, but we're going to say, let's peg a last name onto it. Let's say Bob. In that case, let me change Bob up here to Jim, just because Bob wouldn't be a really good name. But if we're doing a good Southern name here, we're going to do, we're going to tag on Bob to the end of it. And so for each of these names, we're going to take the name and add on Bob to it to make a more Southern sounding name. And if you're from the South and offended by that, I apologize. I'm from the South, and I just find this hilarious. So anyway, new names, let's name it properly, new names here. So I don't know why my keys are going so slowly here, but anyway, it is. So we're going to go up here, we're going to hit the play button, and let's see what happens. We're going to get Joe Bob, Jim Bob, Billy Bob, and Skeeter Bob. Skeeter Bob, it's kind of not really a thing, but we'll just take it. So you can do it, you know, what I'm showing you here is that you can go through a list of strings, you can go through a list of numbers, you can do things upon it. And that is the idea. What you're doing is you're saying for each element in my list, I want to do something to each and every element here. And then I'm going to return a list with those things. So that's what we've done here. And there's also another thing here called a conditional list comprehension. And this is really where you get power as well as complexity. And this is what I want you to, well, I want you to look at this and just look at it in the most simple form here. We're going to do an odd numbers list comprehension, but you can make extremely complicated and complex conditional parts, like the if part here. So you can make it very complicated. You can actually make what you return from it complicated as well. But I'm just going to show you a nice simple example here. And this one, well, first of all, let me explain conditional list. So conditional list comprehension is just like the list comprehension we saw up above, except that over here we have this if condition part. So we're going to be doing something. We're going to have our expression. We're going to do the loop, you know, and bind each value to name, each part of this iterable to name as we go through that loop. But we're going to have the if condition. In other words, we're only going to take this expression here. We're only going to add this to the list if this if condition holds true. That sounds really complicated. It's not when you start using it. And then it'll get really complicated when you really want to make complicated things. But let's just start with an odd number. So we want to take this number list that we have up here, and we want to take only the odd numbers in there. So Well, how do we do that? Let's think about it. Well, if we go through that list, I know the first one's odd, and I know the third one's odd, and I know the fifth one over here is odd. But how do we look at that? Well, remember we divide something by 2. That's how we figure it out. And we know that if you divide it by 2 and nothing is left over, then it is evenly divisible by 2. It's a even number. If you divide the number by 2 and it has a remainder, or the remainder is 1, then you know that it's an odd number. So we're going to use this thing called modulo. We've talked about this before. We're going to say that number modulo 2, in other words, the remainder when divided by 2, if it's equal to 1, then we're going to take num. So we're essentially going through the number list up here. We're taking each one in turn, assigning it to num, and then we're saying, hey, is num divided by 2, the remainder of it, is it equal to 1? If it is, okay, we're going to take num. If not, we're just not going to save anything. We're not going to put anything in the list. So when we hit 1, we say, yep, num modulo 2 equals 1, so we're going to take this one. So that goes into our list. And then we hit 2, we say, is num modulo 2 equal to 1? No, it's not, so we're not going to include that in our list. So then we take the next one, 3, we look, is num modulo 2 equal to 1? Yes, it is, so we're going to say 3. So now our list is 1 and 3. So we go to 4, and over here, this is going to be false, so we don't take 4. So then we go to 5. 5, it is modulo 2 equal to 1, so we take that one. So when we run this, you're going to see that when we do run this, it's going to take just the odd numbers here. So we run it, and it's running very slow for some reason, and we get 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. So this is a conditional in its simplest form. You can get into very complicated things if you wanted to have it, save not just like the element itself, but you can do something to that element and save that in a list, or you can make your if statement, really complex if you like to. So there's a lot of things that you can do. It just, remember, that's going to match whatever the situation is that you have. So, but this is it in its simplest form. Try it out, play around, make your own even numbers. I think the book does even numbers. So that's why I did odd numbers here, but play around with list comprehensions. You'll be surprised at how much fun it can be to create things that, encapsulates the entire for statement, into one line. And that's what really makes this neat and powerful, because if it wasn't for this, we'd have a for statement, we'd have an assignment line, and we'd have to put everything into a list and another line. So it would just be really it would be a little bit overly long, in my opinion, unnecessarily. So list comprehension lets us compact all that into one line, and it's pretty easy to see what it's doing here. So play around with this. If you have any questions, hit me up an email. We can arrange to do a Zoom meet. But otherwise, enjoy. You do want to practice this, though. Do practice this, because practice is going to make you more comfortable with the concept. So I'll see you in the next lesson.